And welcome back, Mindsetters. Hope you had a nice little break. You went and did whatever you had to do. If you weren't paying attention, now you need to start paying attention again because we've got a lot more stuff to cover. So make sure you have your pens and pads out and you're ready to make notes. On that note, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Eugen, who's going to continue. Take it
Thanks,
away.
Ty. Guys, so that's the best part about life sciences is the experiments. And remember that you don't need fancy equipment. You don't need funnels. You can try this experiment out at home. All you need is a 2-liter bottle, cut it up, get some cotton wool, and try these experiments at home. It's fun. Try these experiments out. You'll understand the concepts much better. Let's go back to the concepts of transpiration, and we'll continue with the effect of wind and how wind influences transpiration. Okay, so we're still with the abiotic factors, and we're looking at the physical factors, and next we look at wind and how wind influences the environment. We just looked at a simulation of what transpiration did. We saw that factors like heat, temperature, wind, sunlight all would influence the rate at which plants would lose water. So transpiration basically wind will increase the rate at water loss through transpiration, and thus plants will need to adapt to conserve water. And this is essentially what we're trying to establish today. We're trying to establish how the impact of abiotic factors influence the adaptation of plants to living in those environments. Here, I've got 2 images of plants that adapted to conserving water. Here we've got the aloe, and you'll see lots of these. And you'd notice that the aloe has got a thick, fleshy stem. It's got no leaves. Those leaves have been adapted, or they've been thickened, and they've been modified so that they could reduce the amount of water loss. And remember that these are plants that live in dry, arid conditions that do not get lots of rainfall, and hence they need adaptations to limit the amount of water loss. Here we've got a plant where the leaves have become modified into thorns. This is an acacia plant, and lives in the dry. It's classically found in dry savanna areas, and you'd see that these plants are faced with water shortages most of their time, and hence they need to have modified their leaves into hooks or thorns that prevent them from losing water. They would also have their stomata, which is, I'm going to extend this page here. I'm going to show you a stomatal apparatus very quickly so that you guys understand what the stomata is. At the base of a leaf, guys, you'll find that if we look at the ventral surface of the leaf, right at the bottom, guys, we've got a single layer of cells. Okay, these are the epidermal cells. Okay, I'm going to do this again, guys. Okay, let's get rid of that diagram. Okay, let's try it again. Okay, let's get back to the pen. Okay, pen is obviously playing games with us today. Let's try that again, guys. Right, so here we go. So we've got a single layer of cells at the base of the leaf, and these are epidermal cells. These epidermal cells are unicellular cells that form that layer. Okay, some at the base of the cells you would find a stomatal pore, and this stomatal pore allows for gases to enter and water vapor to leave from the leaf. If I were to draw this in a cross section, that is what the stomata looks like, and this is what controls the movement of water into and the movement of gases, carbon dioxide, and so oxygen moves out, water vapor moves out, and you have CO2 moving into the leaf for the process of photosynthesis. So these plants would have their stomata sunken deep inside the lower surface of the leaf to reduce the rate of transpiration. The next factor we're looking at is water. Water also plays an important limiting factor in terrestrial ecosystems. By terrestrial, we mean ecosystems that are on land. Water will not be a problem for plants that are aquatic because they live in an abundance of water. They would have adapted to living in water, but they would have different challenges of sunlight, and hence we would look at that in a while. So a limiting factor means something too much or too little of will influence the way the organism inhabits that ecosystem. Forests have high rainfalls and large number of plants and animals. If we look at deserts, they have low rainfall and hence their plant and animals that live there are adapted to those dry conditions. And you'd know that the cactus, we looked at we'll see cactus, we looked at aloe vera plants. These plants are adapted. They've got thick succulent leaves that store water. Their roots are very superficial, so that when it rains, they absorb all the surface rain, as compared to plants that live in forests that have roots deep down that can get into the water table and absorb water. Let's move on to the next factor. Okay. Sorry guys, let's do this. It's my preferred site. Okay, let's look at, right. So, aquatic plants, an example of this is a plant that lives in a mangrove. These are plants found in estuaries along the coastal regions where a river meets the sea mouth or the sea. At these areas, you'll find lots of these plants that live on the river banks are adapted to living in conditions of low tide and high tide. During low tides, these roots are exposed to air. During high tides, they submerged. And hence, these plants would have adapted aerial roots that basically grow against gravity to absorb air from the atmosphere. Okay, so you can see that these are roots that are adapted to being airborne. When the tide drops, these roots are exposed and they absorb water from they absorb air from the atmosphere. Okay, that takes us to the end. And here if we look at these slides, you can see here's the sun. We've got different slopes in the environment. We've got lots of rich soil here, cooler moisture areas supporting nice growth of trees. Here we've got dry areas facing the south-facing sides of the mountain, rocky, lots of erosion, cannot support plant life, and hence all these factors collectively influencing the environment. And hence we say that the abiotic factors play a significant role in influencing the environment and the types of organisms and plants that live in there. Ty, we're going to look at a few questions before, if the viewers have posted any questions, and then I'll give you guys some of my questions and we'll attempt to answer them together.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions actually. Mondi wanted to find out, so are the factors related to biotic factors, are there factors that are related to biotic factors because you only mentioned abiotic factors?
Good question, Ty. And Monique, was it Monique, Ty?
Mondi.
Excellent question. We started off with abiotic factors today. Next week, I'm going to look at the biotic factors, and I'm going to look at the interaction between the biotic and abiotic factors, which is essentially what the ecosystem is. And I thought that it would be best today to look at abiotic factors and then to focus on the living factors, which would be the biotic components of an ecosystem. And those would be the producers, the consumers, and the different levels that we see in an ecosystem.
All right, and then we had another one from Khwapelele. Wanted to find out, I want to know which soil between loam, sand, and clay that can hold water for long periods of time.
Well, okay, let's look at that question again, but I'm going to refer to that experiment that we did. In that, we looked at 3 different samples, and we saw that these 3 samples had different abilities of holding water. If I go back to the drawing board, I'm going to extend this page a bit. If we had 3 samples, guys, A, B, and C, and if we had a funnel in there, very quickly, I'm going to draw that funnel in there, and if we had loam, clay, and sand. We got to remember the properties of different of these particles. Loam has a mixture of particles that are small and large, and hence the water holding capacity of loam would be moderate. If we looked at clay has got extremely fine particles, and hence it would tend to cling together, stick together. And you know that Play-Doh, guys, if you were to wash your hands after playing with Play-Doh, it doesn't get off your hand because it sticks together. So we'd expect the water levels in the water retaining capacity of clay to be very high, and hence it would have a high water retaining capacity. If we look at the third sample, which is sandy soil, and we said that you know that if you guys play at the beach and you know when the tide comes in and all the water goes down, why does that happen? Because those particles are loose. They're coarse particles that do not trap the water, and hence the water runs through easily. So we would find the most amount of water coming through from the different soil samples in. So it would have a low water holding capacity. Okay, I spelled that wrong. Let me do that again. Okay, water holding capacity. Okay, hope that answers your question.
Okay. Then on that note, I think
We've got
squeeze in one more.
Okay, yes, we can.
Okay.
Ty.
Lucinda wanted to find out, is it possible to have exophytes and mesophytes in the same in one ecosystem?
Good question. So before I answer that question, I must talk to you about what xerophytes, mesophytes, and hydrophytes are. So water can influence the types of the area and the types of plants. So we have 3 different types of plants classified based on the availability of water. So we have our xerophytes, we have the hydrophytes, and we have the mesophytes. Okay. Xerophytes are plants that are adapted to living in dry, arid conditions. So these would be dry, arid, desert conditions, dry, arid conditions. Your hydrophytes would be plants that live in water. So these are your aquatic plants. And your mesophytes are plants that are adapted to living in areas where there's moderate amounts of water, where there's on land, the plants that you see normally growing in your garden, these would be your mesophytes. The question was, would you find xerophytes and mesophytes planted or naturally in an area? Yes, you could, because these plants, some of them are able to survive in conditions where there is sufficient amount of water, but it's very unlikely to find mesophytes in a habitat where xerophytes are exclusively found. Excellent question. If we don't have any more questions, then I'm going to go back to some of my questions that I've prepared for you guys this afternoon. Ty?
I think that's about it. So good to go.
Okay. So guys, before we wrap up today, I've got a few questions that I want you guys to help me answer, attempt to answer. Okay. So the first question, list 4 climatic factors that may affect the lives of plants and animals. So these would be the physical factors. It would be temperature, it will be light, it will be wind, and it will be the pH of the soil. So these would all influence the environment in which organisms survive. So this would be a very simple question for us. If we go on to the next question, state the characteristics that allow animals and plants to cope with drought. And we know that plants are adapted to conserving water, so reduced surface area, so they have smaller leaves, they have a thick waxy cuticle, thick leaves, they have they have roots on the surface to absorb runoff water. So we'd answer that question. And animals are also adapted. So if you look at your reptiles, they've got an outer layer of scales that reduces dry skin, that reduces evaporation from the skin, as well as they would remain dormant, they would remain in corners where inactive during hot, dry conditions. So their behavior also allows them to be adapted to living in dry conditions. Okay. Ty, do we have time for one more question?
I'm scanning now. I'm trying to see if we've got anything besides them telling me that they're enjoying the show. There's not much there, so I think we continue.
Okay, excellent. So we've come to the end of today. We've got the last few seconds left to wrap up, and all I need to stress to you about is that we've done today the abiotic factors, and you need to remember that it's only a portion of an ecosystem. We need to look at biotic factors next week, and we will look at that in detail and see how biotic factors and the food chain and ecosystems all tie up together. Over to you, Ty.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Eugen. Wow, that was a lot of information, and I hope mindsetters out there made sure that you had your pens and pads out, like I always say. because these guys are very important notes for you guys to study and for your guys' exams. So make sure you're always talking to each other and on the page. And as I always say, it's always good to work in groups. So make sure you tell a friend, tell another friend to make sure they get on the page, then work together, then all of you work together and post. Whenever you guys have a question or something that you want to find out, you just hit us up on the page and I get the questions as the teacher. So make sure, mindsetters, that you keep using the page. And you know the number. I'm thinking it's a cell phone now. I'm so old. But anyway, you know the page, www.facebook.com/learn extra. And also, if you want, you can also tweet me at Learn Extra, because we've got multiple ways we can talk to each other. So make sure, mindsetters, as I always say, keep chatting, talk to each other. And if you see a mindsetter in trouble on the page, don't just flick past and scroll down. Make sure that you guys talk to each other. But on that note, this is where I say, cheers and next time.